morning. So it's been an action-packed morning for many of us. First of all, we got out of bed. A major challenge. Then we sat zazen. And then we came up. We had a ceremony, the annual memorial ceremony for our founder, Shunryu Suzuki, Roshi. And then we went back to the Zendo and had oryoki breakfast. When I returned to the Zendo, I was thinking, maybe it was more feeling like, where am I? Who am I? And I was struck by the notion, well, this is the Zen way, immerse you in this, take you out, immerse you in this, take you out, and then immerse you in that. And each one of them being itself, and then we know ourselves, sort of, within that context, within that world of being. And then we leave it and we move to the next one. And then we discover that world. And then we move to the third one, which has the same setting as the first one. But in another way, it's quite different. Each of them being a realm of practice, a kaya. Yeah. When Hiro was talking about a week and a half ago, he was talking about the baseball, what do they call the final series? World Cup. World Series. Okay. So I've fully exposed the World Series. And I think he was describing, and this is its own realm of being, Maybe the greatest World Series ever. We're invited, the moment is offering us an invitation, an opportunity to immerse body and mind in the way of that kaya, in the way of that world. Yeah. And then we get to experience, well, who am I? Who am I when I'm sitting down to be zazen? And then who am I when we're circumambulating the Zendo, the Buddha hall? Or who am I when I return to the Zendo? Are we just going to do it the way we've always done it? Well, wait a minute. The food hasn't arrived. That's how it was this morning. And we I was going to say we managed to get through it, but if we think like that, in a way, we diminish the virtue, we diminish the invitation to be that experience. Yeah. It's offering itself to immersion, immersing body and mind deeply in the way, awakening true mind. Apparently, someone was inspired by the phrase, taking refuge in Buddha. And as we move from world to world, kaya to kaya, we have the opportunity to be in that world, to experience it, and experience how it creates the self that we think we are. And we have more ceremonies to come. When we can tap into the aliveness of a kaya, it's almost like we can pick it up and be in relationship with it. And then Zen practice asks us, okay, finished, go on to the next one. Pick it up. And something in the picking up, something in the transition, can sometimes feel a little unnerving, you know? Like I've had people over the years, no one recently, but who said, well, I just look at the ceremonies as an opportunity for mindfulness, you know? I sort of like, I'm just in my body, paying attention to my body, bowing, chanting. But usually the ceremony has much more intrigue than that. Suzuki Roshi. Is he alive or dead? In what way is he still alive? And in what way he's not? Sojin Mel Weissman said to me once, people are easier to have a relationship with than they're dead. They can't argue back. Yeah. And having the capacity to immerse, to give over, and then withdraw, sort of, and be the next thing. Yeah. And maybe even watch how, in a way, you're discombobulated. Or maybe you want to take something of your being in that realm of existence and carry it with you to the next. Yeah. This is the character Den on your rakusu. This, on the Shuso's rakusu, this word that I'm using, kaya. In the Japanese, it's Den, D-E-N. And it's on her rakusu. It's translated as field. Yeah. Field of being, realm of being, world of being. And so, can you move from world to world? Can you move from zazen in the Zendo, ceremony in the Buddha Hall, oryoki in the Zendo, break in your room, work period? Each of them be almost like a new life? You know, many of us, when we're giving way-seeking mind talks, say things like, well, in a former life, I did this. And it did feel like a whole life. In a former life, I went to college and I studied whatever I studied. Can we allow for the alchemy between sense of self and the impact of the surroundings of a particular kaya? Yeah. And in a way, if we want to be clever about it, we can say, well, this is Zen training. In some ways, sometimes in Zen, it's like everything's described as a ritual. We go through the ritual of zazen. We go through the ritual of ritual. We go through the ritual of oryoki. Yeah. Can we give over to each one? Can we see how it's impacting us? How maybe in a subtle way, or maybe not so subtle way, we're resisting it. Or in another way, how we're enthralled by it. Yeah. Maybe you can think, what adjectives would you use for this morning's annual memorial service? Was it enthralling? Was it inspiring? Was it boring? Was it not what you came here for? And there's a way in which every answer is just that person's answer. You know? So in 1244, the year, Dogen Zenji gave 2 talks. He gave a talk in the afternoon, and then he gave a talk somewhat the same and somewhat different in the evening. The first talk was at a temple, and it was for the monks and nuns of that temple. And he talked about 3 kinds of mind. And then he talked about how they give over, they bring forth unsurpassable Mujo Shin. The full title is Hatsu Mujo Shin. Arising, establishing, the translation I'm used to is, it says supreme consciousness. Shin is consciousness. But not supreme in the way we think of it. Well, supreme has a kind of gradation to it. There's what's at the bottom, there's what's in the middle, and then there's the supreme on the top. It's more like, it's so intensely itself, it can't be judged. Like when Hiro was giving his talk, and he said, best final ever. He was also sort of saying, to my ear, well, it was just a game. It was just a bunch of guys hitting a little ball around a field. So that version of supreme, that each thing has the potential to just be itself. And then Dogen, in the evening, he gave a version of the same talk, and he called that one Hatsu Bodai Shin. Establishing arousing, or arousing, way-seeking mind. You know? And in both of them, he started with the same kind of perspective. Here's the perspective he laid out. He said, there's 3 kinds of consciousness. One is citta, or discriminating mind, that way in which we have opinions. This is better than that. We formulate concepts. And that aspect of our consciousness really is supported by the function of discrimination. And then the second kind of consciousness, hridaya, it's the suchness of the moment, which includes both, yes, it is just a bunch of guys hitting a ball around a field, and it's also what we call the World Series. it has multiple kayas. And then the third one, which I find the most intriguing, is vriddha. These are Sanskrit words. And that consciousness learns about practice. That consciousness has the capacity, when there's direct experiencing of the moment, of learning from that experience. And over the years, I've compared those two fascicles of Dogen, thinking, well, who was he talking to, and who did he think he was talking to when he gave the first talk? And who was he talking to in the evening? Bodhishin resonates more for me. You know, learning from the moment's experience. But actually, all three play a role. This is part of Dogen's teachings in those two fascicles. He says, chitta, discerning mind, plays a role. The suchness of experiencing the suchness of what is. Here we all are in a tatami room, and I'm talking and you're not. And I'm trying to make sense out of what I'm saying. And hoping it has some way of inspiring you and encouraging you to practice. And then Dogen says, and the suchness of Hridaya and the discrimination of chitta, when they're brought into being skillfully, then they present an experience that can teach us how to practice. And I know that's a kind of elaborate thought, but when we're in the midst of it, and we're engaging that being in the midst of, then the teaching of it happens. Yeah. You know, I think we've all experienced, you know, periods of zazen where, despite our good intentions, despite our skillful engagement, the mind just wouldn't be quiet. And yet, when the bell rung and we stood up, there was some palpable energy, clarity, awareness in that moment. I think it points to I was just struck by that. We're struck by the moment of a passing car and just what it's producing. The particulars, when those two, Chitta and Hridaya, learn discernment and suchness, when they come into mutual being, when they form a relationship, something is sparked. Whether it meets our approval or not. Whether or not we say, best series ever, or we say, why don't they just go home and and clean the house? And then this is like arrow points meeting head on, as we chanted this morning. You know? And in the sutra we chanted, it says, what has this to do with skill? Is it an accident, as Eiken Roshi would say? Personally, I think it's more intriguing than that. We can incline ourselves to appreciate the moment. We can incline ourselves to hear the bell and just marvel at the moment. Almost like a moment of gratitude for being alive. Yeah. We can invite ourselves beyond the usual patterns of thinking. And if some of our emotional life is asserting itself, we can even hold that too. You know, oh, I'm surprised by the bell, the front door bell. And I have some kind of yearning that comes up. You know, that the moment can, it can move us in all sorts of ways. You know. And Shikantaza is saying, can you be present for that? Not can you make it a certain way. Can you sit down and with determined devotion make it your experience a certain way? And you know, if we work at it hard enough, we can. But Dogen Zenji says, but that's not the point. The point is not to make the world the way, or even your own consciousness, the way you want it. Can we be receptive to the moment? And that receptivity can be joined with a certain purposefulness. You know, when we sit zazen, we purposefully find a posture that we can be stable within. We find a posture that helps the body to be vibrant, you know. And we find a way of breathing that also helps something fundamental in our being to come forth. And as many of you know, I am a big fan of not a baseball team, but body and mind, body and breath, you know. I really think it's very helpful to cultivate the capacity to sit and to let the breath flow through. Because consciousness is so incredibly diverse, you know, if we can have a way of holding it, stabilizing it, all the better. Actually, it won't stop it from being diverse, but it will make awareness of its diversity more available. And this is chitta and hridaya coming together. Okay, can we do this together? Can we do zazen together? Well, let's give it a shot. You know, you handle the directed awareness, and I'll handle the receptive awareness. And of course, I'm being foolish because these two come into play in the midst of a chorus of voices that are singing desire, aversion. I've got to think about this. I've got to worry about that. I've got to yearn for this. Can we remind ourselves? Can chitta, discerning consciousness, remind us, okay, all that has its own kind of relevance, but for now, let's just be simple and experience the moment. And when we do that, chitta and hridaya, it's like that term I was using for a couple of days, kanno doko, mystical communication. Not by design, but by giving over. We can let those two aspects of consciousness inform each other. We can see the sunlight shining in the window, and we can notice what kind of receptivity is there for the suchness of that being. As we move through the various kayas of Ryushin, can we be curious about each one? Can we be attentive to what it brings up for us? And then this mysterious hridaya, not vriddha, that learns from the experience of the meeting of both of those worlds. So I would say to you, can you let each aspect of sesshin, like when you're doing oryoki, can you immerse in it? Even if you're forgetting the details. Immerse in forgetting the details. Can each activity, each kaya of sesshin be a world you can immerse in? Yeah. If the work leader gives you a work assignment that you really don't like, can you delve into not liking? This is way-seeking mind. Yeah. We delve into it, not because we're trying to make it something different from what it is, but more in the realm of fully experiencing it. Yeah. When I get a work assignment I don't like, do I start to think about all the other things I don't like? And I don't like the work leader. And I don't like these people, these Zen people. They're weird. And we're not getting enough sleep. And whatever. Or does that moment of dislike somehow amuse you? Oh, look at me. I'm thinking somehow, because I'm a Zen student, the whole world will formulate itself in a way that I like. You know, in a way, it's a shameless acknowledgement of who you are. And that shamelessness will help the usual filters you put on your experience, help them to fall away. And somehow we learn. Sometimes it's evident to us what we've learned, and sometimes it's just not. What did you learn through doing these 3 activities back to back? I don't know. I have notions around the sense of adaptability, repeated immersion, picking something up and putting it down, non-clinging. And maybe something that seems from a different world speaks to us. So that's my version of Dogen's Hatsu Budaishin. You know, before Ryushin started, I was thinking I would weave this poem into Ryushin, but I just haven't formulated a plausibility for it. So I'm going to read a part of it anyway. I find it's by Mahmoud Darwish, who's deceased, but he was a famous Palestinian poet. To describe almond blossoms, the glossary of flowers doesn't come to my aid. Neither does the dictionary. Speech will snatch me to the scam of eloquence. Eloquence wounds and then eulogizes the wound. To describe almond blossoms, I need visitations to the subconscious to guide me to the name of an emotion that hangs in the trees. What is that name? What is that name? This poetics of nothing? What the human mind is capable of. The poetics of nothing. You know, a couple of days ago I read the last line of Wallace Stevens' poem. Wallace Stevens had the exalted job of selling insurance. And he would drive around, and in between selling insurance, he would stop and he would write some poetry. And on that day, he wrote, "Nothing that isn't there." That kind of utter suchness, and the nothing that is there. That way, when we stop our incessant discriminating mind, the sensations of the moment come forth. Yeah. So can you immerse? Not because it's going to bring you some prize. But actually because it teaches us how to live in a way that we can pick up the different parts of our life and relate to them with appreciation, courage, trust, and maybe it'll inspire us to chant, "I take refuge in Buddha." Thank you.